When fighting monsters, make sure you don't become a monster yourself. This is a quote by Friedrich Nietzsche, and I wanted to use this opportunity to talk a little bit about how I'm feeling right now. I feel a bit iffy about the markets and the situation in society, and I keep reading Nietzsche, and I just want to draw that connection and share my thoughts. This is the Not Even Wrong podcast. It's June 14th. It's a Sunday, so there's no updates. And let's get right into it. I feel pretty iffy about the markets right now, not necessarily because they rallied and because valuations are high, any of that stuff. As I explained in various episodes before, we are trying to take timing out of the equation by investing in things that over the long term will do very well. So that's not necessarily my concern, but there's always this little question I have in the back of my mind. Well, what if everything collapses? What if what if the fabric of our society falls apart? What if we have some sort of uprising or civil war or complete deconstruction of society? I mean, obviously, under the circumstance like that, you can't just hold on to your stuff. You have to completely change your strategy. And I feel iffy. I don't think I need to go buy guns and hide in the woods. But in a situation where things fall apart, you have to rethink your strategy. I think the cathedral that we live in is threatened, and under these circumstances, you just have to rethink your strategy. Let me elaborate. Let's start with the societal issues that we have. It's June 14th, 2020, so we have COVID-19 still prevalent. And I think what COVID-19 has shown, unfortunately, is two things. One is that anything important we cannot leave to the experts. In the case of COVID-19, I think the health community as a whole has failed and has not been able to manage it properly, give proper advice, and do anything which was useful. Unfortunately, and that's very prevalent in our society. I mean, imagine if you had to rely on your accountant for your money, on your doctor for your health, or on your general for war. It typically doesn't work out very well. That's why we invented democracy and the wisdom of crowds and markets and things like that, because experts just don't do well in tough situations where decisions are crucial. So COVID-19 has shown that experts cannot help us in times of crisis. Unfortunately, COVID-19 has also shown us that with a blink of an eye, we can throw away institutions such as checks and balances, the legislator, which we have in our society, in the U.S. and in Europe and in some parts outside of there. That unelected health officials can just make decisions about, let's say, people have to wear masks and things like that, which is number one, absolutely not proven that even helps. But more importantly, even if it helps, there still has to be a process in place where people make decisions and weigh pros and cons. For example, the COVID-19 lockdowns have seriously jeopardized the cancer community, and generally many other communities in the medical world have been put on hold because drug studies cannot be conducted. So if you have a blood disease, or if you have a liver disease and there is some experimental drug that could help you, you just have to wait 3 to 6 months now because of COVID-19. And I feel like this question, well, we have to save X by doing a lockdown, and therefore the collateral damage is Y. We haven't even had that discussion. And what that has led to is, I think, a deconstruction of the fabric. What I mean with that is that because of that, everybody now thinks they can take the law in their own hands. The police and the rioters and lots of people, the doorman in your building ordering you to wear a mask. Like it just, the like Uber thinks they can dominate their drivers by putting cameras in front of them so that they're constantly monitored, make sure they follow the hygiene procedures. I don't know. It's this Orwellian nightmare that is coming upon us. And unfortunately, it happened. I mean, and that's my point here. I don't want to discuss it much further. I just want to put the point out that it happened. It happened in the blink of an eye. It took a couple of weeks for a lot of people in the United States to throw away most of the liberties that this country was fighting for 250 years. Yes, they didn't feel it on their own skin. It's not like they became, dominated by the monarchs and put back into the pre-revolutionary system of English aristocracy or anything like that. But still, there was a, a serious attempt, there was a serious threat to liberties, which, in my view, has not been answered properly. So this is one thing that makes me feel iffy, and that's partly why we have all these riots now going, not just in the US, but around the world. People are standing up there. Number one, also tired of lockdowns, but number two, they feel like, well, look, if unelected health officials can make decisions, why can't I make decisions? I think we need to get back to checks and balances in democracy. And that leads me to the other problem that I see, and that is the loss of control in our economy. And by loss of control, I mean we're losing the markets and we're putting ourselves in a position where we have a centrally planned economy, and it's unintentional. I don't think anybody in the US is deliberately trying to get to a centrally planned economy, don't get me wrong, but the way the Fed and the monetary system is slipping into a rabbit hole of controlled interest rates is very scary. And the consequence of that is a controlled environment and a centrally planned economy. And no matter how you turn it, it's gonna turn into that type of situation if we don't do something about it. And that's where my quote comes from the beginning. If you fight monsters, make sure you don't become a monster yourself. If you fight monsters, make sure you don't become a monster yourself. Friedrich Nietzsche. It's an aphorism that he wrote in his book Beyond Good and Evil, Jenseits von Gut und Böse. And what he meant with that is exactly what the quote says. If you fight monsters, make sure you don't become a monster yourself. The Fed is on the way to become a monster because it's fighting this gigantic monster of economic slowdown, high government debt, COVID-19, lockdowns. All these things are just piling up. And Jerome Powell is in a position where he has to fight this monster, and he himself is becoming a monster. Just look at last Wednesday's Fed press conference. He made a few comments. The market collapsed 6% after that. He didn't say much new things or anything like that, but he is just becoming this gigantic monster. He's this big guy walking around, and we're all ants, and unintentionally he's just stepping on us and killing us. And I think that's very scary. Why? Because, like I said before, we can't leave important decisions to experts. We can't leave health decisions to doctors or health officials. We can't leave economic decisions to economists. It has to happen through markets, through wisdom of crowds, democracy, debate. It can't happen that a bunch of Fed governors make decisions about the interest rate, control the interest rate curve, not just short-term interest rates. Here, as a reminder, the way we organized the Fed when we founded it in 1913 was we said, we're going to control short-term rates and let the market decide the rest. And that in itself was very controversial, but at least we said, look, we're going to control something, and then the big chunk is controlled by the market. Now we're on the brink of controlling everything, and that just doesn't bode well. And why am I intrigued by Nietzsche? Well, his writings, as brutal as they might seem when you read it and when you look at some of the interpretations, like Nazi Germany